Picture a child, asleep in the dark. And somewhere in that same room, a mosquito has already found her. It sounds like something from 100 years ago, but it isn't. Malaria still kills hundreds of thousands of people every year, and most of them are children under the age of 5. For a century, our best defence has been the oldest one there is, a net over the bed. And the newest defence, a vaccine that scientists have chased for decades, turns out to depend on something strange and very small. Not a chemical, not a pill in the way you'd picture one, a shape. So to understand how a shape can save a child's life, we have to start with what a protein really is. Every living thing you've ever met runs on proteins. And a protein starts out as something that sounds almost too simple. A long chain, like a bead necklace laid out in a straight line. But the instant it's made, it folds, all by itself, into an intricate three-dimensional shape. And that shape is everything. It's what decides the job the protein does, whether it carries oxygen around your body or fights off an infection, or, in the case of malaria, lets a parasite slip past your immune system unnoticed. So if you want a medicine to work, you need it to reach in and grab one exact shape and hold on. And here's the catch, the thing that makes this hard. For about 50 years, working out the shape a protein would fold into was one of the hardest problems in all of science. A single one could take a researcher a good chunk of their career. And then, in just the last few years, a system called AlphaFold learned to do it in minutes. Not for one protein, for 200 million of them, very nearly every protein known to science. A 50-year wall, and it came down almost overnight. It won a Nobel Prize. Now I want to hand you the one idea that runs underneath this whole story, because once you notice it, you can't stop seeing it. Whenever people worry about artificial intelligence, they often say the same thing. Well, it can only ever know what it was trained on. And that's true, but it's also beside the point, because that folded shape, it was always there. Nature had been folding proteins in that exact way for billions of years before anyone switched on a computer. AlphaFold didn't create the shape, it noticed it. And when you think about it, most of science has always worked like that. Newton didn't invent gravity, he noticed it. The valuable act, more often than not, isn't inventing something from nothing. It's noticing what was there all along. Discovery, not invention. Hold on to that, because we come back to it right at the end. Which brings us to the word this whole story really turns on: innovation. And it turns out there are two very different ways to hear that word. The official definition, the one governments and economists reach for, calls innovation a new or improved product, service, or process that differs significantly from what came before. It's careful and it's genuinely useful, and notice what it's built to do. It measures. It counts innovation up and sorts it by type. But there's a second way to hear the word, and it comes from the design studio IDEO. In their version, innovation doesn't begin with a product at all. It begins with a human being and a need that isn't being met. So one side measures innovation, and the other side makes it. And once you start looking for it, you realise no single authority actually owns this word. The policy view measures innovation and rides the wave of the technology. The human-centred view, IDEO's view, starts from a real person and what they're missing. And the discipline view, from places like MIT, keeps everyone honest and reminds us of something that's easy to forget, that the people who actually use a thing very often innovate before any company gets around to it. 3 lenses, no referee. And that mix isn't a weakness or a sign nobody's agreed yet. It's the whole point. It helps to see where all of this is coming from. We tend to tell the story of industry in chapters. The first one was water and steam, machines that finally did the work our muscles used to. The second was electricity, and the moving assembly line. The third was computers and automation. And the fourth, the one we're standing in right now, is cyber-physical systems, the Internet of Things, machine learning. And here's the thing they all have in common. Every one of those chapters was chasing the same prize. More. More output, more speed, more scale. And then, quietly, something changes. In 2021, the European Union names a fifth chapter, Industry 5.0. And for the very first time, the goal isn't more. It's three different words: human-centric, sustainable, resilient. And this isn't only on paper either. You can walk into it in advanced manufacturing hubs like the Factory of the Future at Flinders University in Adelaide, where the whole point is people and machines working together. We spent a century getting extraordinarily good at producing more. And then we noticed that producing more, on its own, was never really the point. There's one more idea worth having in your pocket before we head to the frontier. Innovation is never really a lone genius in a garage. Scholars picture it more like a helix, strands winding around each other. Universities make the knowledge. Industry turns that knowledge into products. Government sets the rules and the funding. And then a fourth strand got added to the picture: civil society, which is really just ordinary people and what they value. Japan gave the whole thing a name: Society 5.0. Technology aimed, deliberately, at a human-centred society. Which is a little striking when you think about it, because everyone now says human-centric. And IDEO has been quietly working exactly that way since the 1990s. So let's go to the frontier now, and let's be honest about it. There's a bold claim being made right now that AI is shifting from a tool you pick up and put down into something more like infrastructure, the ground that everything else gets built on. And you can see why people say it. It's turning up everywhere. In the shop that seems to read your mind, the parcel that arrives before you expected it, the factory that quietly tunes itself. Reasoning models that think before they answer, agents that go off and act on their own, systems that can see and hear and speak, chips and even whole operating systems built around it. And the part we're here for, AI turned loose on science itself. But I'd hold that word infrastructure at arm's length, because these are very early days. AI being in everything, your phone, your earbuds, your TV, is not the same thing as AI being something a business simply can't survive without. And think about what calling it infrastructure really asks of you. You'd pour millions into building on it while the ground is still shifting month to month. A better model comes along, or something gets disrupted, and you're rebuilding from scratch. There are questions of sovereignty too, about whose systems you're now standing on. And notice, the example that genuinely dazzles us here, AlphaFold, wasn't a giant chatbot at all. It was a small, specialist model. So this is a frontier, real, and worth taking seriously. But building your foundations on something this fluid is its own kind of risk. A frontier, not yet a foundation. And nowhere is that shift clearer than in the way we design new medicines. The old way was almost brute force. You'd take a target in the body and then throw a million different molecules at it and wait to see what happened to stick. The new way turns that completely around, because now you already know the exact shape of the target protein. So instead of guessing, you design the one molecule that fits it. Rational design instead of trial and error. And here's the number that reframes the whole thing for me. The count of possible drug-like molecules is around 10 to the 60th. That's a 1 with 60 zeros after it. More than the stars in the sky, by a margin that's almost violent. And somewhere in that unimaginable space sits the molecule that treats a particular disease. It already exists. No human being and no laboratory on Earth could ever search a space that large by hand. But a well-built model can go looking. And notice, it doesn't invent the cure. It finds the one that was there all along. And this isn't a thought experiment or something for 10 years from now. It's being pointed at real diseases right now. Malaria, infections that shrug off our antibiotics. Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, Huntington's, all diseases where proteins fold the wrong way. Neglected diseases like Chagas and Leishmaniasis that don't get much attention. And cancer. Now, it helps to understand why a new medicine costs what it does, because that's the part that makes all of this matter. So picture a funnel. Right at the top, you've got around 10,000 compounds, all being screened. Of those, only about 250 make it into the early preclinical work. Maybe 5 of them reach human trials. And, on average, just 1 becomes a medicine you can actually walk into a pharmacy and pick up. And even among the drugs that make it as far as people, roughly 9 in 10 still fail. That one survivor costs somewhere near $1 billion. And once you count all the failures standing behind it, it's closer to 2.5 or even 3 billion. So when AI can narrow the top of that funnel, even a little, the effect all the way down the line is enormous. Now, a caveat, and I want to be honest about it because it matters. AlphaFold is not some all-knowing chatbot. It's a specialist. A purpose-built biology model trained on molecular structures, not on the open internet. It makes predictions, and it makes mistakes. And the laboratory still has to go and check its work. Even the people who built it will tell you that plainly. And that isn't a footnote to skip past. It's actually the lesson. The frontier of science doesn't run on one giant general intelligence that knows everything. It runs on careful, specialised tools, each built for a single job, and checked every time by human beings. Which gives us a nice way to cut through the hype. Take the 8 technologies everyone loves to file under the future and just sort them, honestly, into what's real, what's coming, and what's mostly a slogan. Some of them are already here and working. Explainable AI, systems that can actually show you their reasoning. Robotics with real cognition, on factory floors and in warehouses today. And the cognitive assistants that a lot of us already talk to every single day. Then there's a genuine frontier. Things that are real but still years away. Artificial general intelligence, brain-inspired neuromorphic chips, quantum AI riding on 6th generation networks. And then, if we're being honest with each other, a couple that are mostly marketing. The autonomous supply chain is a shiny label on optimization we've been doing for years. And predictive ethics, the idea that software can prejudge right from wrong before anything happens, isn't really a field at all. And the sorting matters because it tells you what to actually trust today and what to just keep half an eye on. But every one of these advances has another side to it, and it would be dishonest to just skip past that. The same innovation that finds a cure can also bring job displacement. Work that gets stripped of the things that made it feel human. Knowledge that gets hoarded or quietly hidden. Inequality as the gains pool up at the very top. Bias baked so quietly into a model that nobody notices. Privacy worn away a little at a time. And a genuinely hard question sitting underneath all of it. When a machine makes the call, who is answerable when it gets that call wrong? And the sharpest version of that question is already out on our roads, self-driving cars. Most people are wary of them, and not without reason. As recently as last year, around 6 in 10 American drivers said they were still afraid to ride in a fully self-driving car, and only about 1 in 8 said they'd actually trust one. And the fears aren't abstract. Teslas have been investigated by regulators over what's called phantom braking, slamming on the brakes for a hazard that simply wasn't there. And when one of these cars does cause harm, we hit a wall. Because who is answerable? The person in the seat who wasn't driving? The company? Or the algorithm itself? The courts are still working it out. And this is exactly where researchers Kogali and McKidd plant their flag. They weigh it the utilitarian way, by the greatest good for the greatest number, and through social impact theory, which is really just a formal way of asking the question this whole film keeps circling back to. Good for whom? So the real question was never efficiency or people, as if you had to stand on one side and pick. The researchers behind this, Kigali and McKidd, weigh the promise against the cost, and then ask a sharper question. Which one are we actually building for? On one side of the scale, you've got cures found faster and discovery at a scale no human could match. And on the other, displacement and a widening gap in who holds the power. And the answer isn't to choose a side and defend it. It's to keep the whole scale balanced, and balanced on people. And when you finally stand back from all of it, the strange thing, the quietly reassuring thing, is how much these frameworks were agreeing with each other the whole time. Industry 5.0, Society 5.0, human-centered design. Each one, in its own language, was pointing in the same direction. The innovation that lasts, the innovation that's actually worth having, is the kind that's pointed at people. The shape was always there. We just had to notice it. This film was made with AI. The research, the drafting, and even the voice you're listening to right now. Every fact in it was checked against its original source, but the argument and the responsibility for every word are human. Thanks for watching, and if the idea stuck with you, subscribe for the next one, where we follow innovation to where it actually matters, the people.